So I wanted to do something for Halloween, as I do pretty much every year, but as usual I couldn't come up with any good ideas. But eventually I started to run out of time and decided to do this. While the SpeedPaint runs in the background, I will read for you a poem by Edgar Allan Poe by the title of A Cask of Amontillado. I've always loved old stories, and whenever I was in high school, my English class did a unit over Edgar Allan Poe, and this was one of the stories that we read that I remembered the best, so I decided to read this. So here we go. The Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe, read by yours truly, so expect some tripping up. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to any threat. At length I would be avenged. This was a point definitely settled, but the very definiteness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong undressed with retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally undressed with the avenger falls to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my good will. I continued, as it was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. He had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards he was a man to be respected and even feared. He prided himself on his connoisseurship of fine wine. Few Italians have the true virtuoso spirit. For the most part, their enthusiasm is adopted to suit the time and the opportunity, to practice imposure upon the British and Austrian millionaires. In painting in Germany, Fortunato, like his countrymen, was a quack. But in the matter of old wines, he was sincere. In this respect I did not differ from him. Materially I was skilled in the Italian vintages myself, and I bought largely whenever I could. It was about dusk one evening during the supreme madness of the carnival season that I encountered my friend. He accosted me with excessive warmth, for he had been drinking much. The man wore motley. He had on a tight-fitted, party-striped dress, and his head was surmounted by a conical cap and bells. I was so pleased to see him that I thought I should never have done wringing his hand. I said to him, "My dear Fortunato, you were luckily met. How remarkably well you are looking today. But I have received a pipe of what passes for Amontillado, and I have my doubts." "How?" he said. "Amontillado? Pipe? Impossible. And in the middle of a carnival." I wanted to say festival there for some reason. "I have my doubts," I replied, "and I was silly enough to pay the full Amontillado price without consulting you on the matter. You are not to be found, and I was fearful of losing a bargain." "Amontillado? I have my doubts." "Amontillado?" "And I must satisfy them." "Amontillado? As you are engaged, I am on my way to see Lucchesi. If anyone has a critical turn, it is he. He will tell me. Lucchesi cannot tell Amontillado from sherry, and yet some fools will have it that his taste is match for your own. Come, let us go." "Whither? To your vaults?" "My friend, no. I will not impose upon your good nature. I perceive you have an engagement." "Lucchesi, I have no engagement. Come." "My friend, no. It is not the engagement, but the severe cold with which I perceive you are afflicted. The vaults are insufferably damp. They are encrusted with nitre. Let us go, nevertheless. The cold is merely nothing. Amontillado, you have been imposed upon, and as for Lucchesi, he cannot distinguish sherry from Amontillado." Thus speaking, Fortunato possessed himself of my arm, putting on a mask of black silk, and drawing a word I cannot hope to pronounce closely about my person. I suffered him to hurry me to my I have no idea how to say words. I am so sorry. This was probably a guilt-conceived idea. Palazzo, I'm going to go with. There were no attendants at home. They had absconded to make merry in honor of the time. I had told them that I should not return until the morning, and had given them explicit orders not to stir from the house. These orders were sufficient, I well knew, to ensure their immediate disappearance, one and all, as soon as my back was turned. I took from their sconces 2, I'm going to say torches, and gave one to Fortunato, bowed him enough several suits in rooms to the archway that led into the vaults. I passed down a long and winding staircase, requesting him to be cautious as he followed. We came at length to the foot of the descent, and stood together on the damp ground of the catacombs of the Montresors. The gait of my friend was unsteady, and the bells upon his cap jingled as he strode. "The pipe?" he said. "It's further on," said I, "but observe the white webbing work which gleams from these cavern walls." He turned toward me and looked into my eyes with 2 filmy orbs that distilled the rhythm of intoxication. "Niter," he asked at length. "Niter," I replied. "How long have you had that cough?" He coughs. My poor friend found it impossible to reply for many minutes. "It is nothing," he said at last. "Come," I said with decision. "We will go back. Your health is precious. The rich are respected, admired, loved. You are happy, as once I was. You are a man to be missed. For me it is no matter. We will go back. You will be ill, and I cannot be responsible. Besides, there is Luchesi." "Enough," he said. "The cough is mere nothing. It will not kill me. I cannot die of a cough." True, I replied. "And indeed I have no intention of alarming you unnecessarily, but you should use all proper caution. A draught of this Medoc will defend us from the damps." Here I knocked off the neck of a bottle which I drew from the long row of its fellows and lay upon the mound. "Drink," I said, presenting him with the wine. He raised it to his lips with a leer. He paused and nodded to me familiarly, while his bells jingled. "I drink," he said, "to the buried that repose around us, and I to your long life." Again he took my arm, and we proceeded. "These vaults," he says, "are extensive. The Montresors," I replied, "were a great and numerous family. I forget your arms." A huge human foot dore in a field of azure. The foot crushes a serpent rampant whose fangs embedded in the heel. And the motto? Something in Italian that I couldn't possibly hope to pronounce correctly. "Good," he said. The wine sparkled in his eyes and the bells jingled. My own fancy grew warm with the Medoc, and we had passed through walls of piled bones, with casks and panchions intermingling into the inmost recesses of the catacombs. I paused again, and this time I made bold to seize Fortunato an arm above the elbow. "The nitre," I said. "See, it increases. It hangs like moss upon the vaults. We are below the river's bed. The drops of moisture trickle through the bones. Come, we will go back, ere it is too late. Your cough." "It's nothing," he said. "Let us go on. But first another draught of the Medoc." I broke and reached him a flagon of another Italian thing that I can't pronounce. He'd emptied it in a breath. His eye flashed with fierce light. He laughed and threw the bottle upwards with a gesture I did not understand. I looked at him in surprise, and he repeated the movement, a grotesque one. "You do not comprehend?" he said. "Not I," I replied. "Then you are not of the Brotherhood?" "How?" "You are not of the Masons?" Yes, I said. Yes. "You? Impossible. A Mason?" "A Mason," I replied. "A sign," he said. "It is this," I answered, producing a trowel from beneath the folds of my... I'm going to go with clothes. "You jest," he exclaimed, rolling a few paces. "But let us proceed to the Amontillado." "Be it so," I said, replacing the trowel beneath the cloak. And again offering him my arm, he leaned on it heavily. We continued our route in search of the Amontillado. We passed through a range of low arches, descended, passed on, and descending again, arriving in a deep crypt, in which the foulness of the air caused our torches rather to glow than flame. At the most remote end of the crypt there appeared another less spacious. Its walls had been lined with human remains, piled to the vault overhead, in the fashion of the great catacombs of Paris. 3 sides of the interior crypt were still ornamented in this manner. From the 4th the bones had been thrown down and lay promiscuously upon the earth, forming at one point a mound from some size. Within the wall thus exposed by the displacing of the bones, we perceived a still interior recess, in depth about 4 feet, in width 3, and in height 6 or 7. It seemed to have been constructed for no essential use within itself, but formed merely the interversal between 2 of the causal supports of the roof and the catacombs, and was backed by one of their circumscribing walls of solid granite. It was in vain that Fortunato, lighting his dull torch, endeavored to pry into the depth of the recess. Its termination the feeble light did not enable us to see. "Proceed," I said. "Herein is the Amontillado. As for Lucchesi, he is an ignoramus," interrupted my friend, as he stepped unsteadily forward, while I followed immediately at his heels. In the instant he had reached the extremity of the niche, and finding his progress arrested by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. A moment more, and I had feathered him to the granite. In its surface were two iron staples distant from each other about 2 feet horizontally. From one of these depended a short chain, from the other a padlock. Throwing these links about his waist, it was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. Withdrawing the key, I stepped back from the recess. "Pass your hand," I said, "over the wall. You cannot help feeling the niter. Indeed, it is very damp. Once more, let me implore you to return." "No, then I must positively leave you, but I must first render you all the little attentions in my power." "The Amontillado," my friend demanded, not yet recovered from his astonishment. "True," I replied, "the Amontillado." As I said these words, I busied myself among the pile of bones of which I had before spoken. Throwing them aside, I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. With these materials, and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall the entrance of the niche. I had scarcely laid the first tier of masonry when I discovered that the intoxication of Fortunato had in a great measure worn off. The earliest indication I had of this was the low moaning cry from the depths of the recess. It was not the cry of a drunken man. There was then a long, obstinate silence. I laid the second tier, the third, the fourth, and then I heard a furious vibration of the chain. The noise lasted for several minutes, during which, that I might hearken to it with more satisfaction, I ceased my labors and sat down upon the bones. When at last the clinking subsided, I resumed the trowel, and finished without interruption the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th layer. The wall was now nearly upon level with my breast. I again paused, and holding the torch over the mason work, threw a few feeble rays upon the figure within. A succession of loud and shrill screams, bursting suddenly from the throat of the chained form, seemed to thrust me violently back. For a brief moment I hesitated. I trembled. Unsheathing my rapier, I began to grope with it about the recess, but the thought of an instant reassured me. I placed my hand upon the solid fabric of the catacombs, and felt satisfied. I reapproached the wall. I replied to the yells of him who clamored. I re-echoed, I aided, I surpassed them in volume and in strength. I did this, and the clamor grew still. It was now midnight, and my task was drawing to a close. I had completed the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th tier. I had finished a portion of the last of the 11th. There remained but a single stone to be fitted and plastered. I struggled with its weight. I placed it partially in its distant position, but now there came from out of the niche a low laugh that stood the hairs upon my head. It was succeeded by a sad voice, which I had difficulty in recognizing as that of the noble Fortunato. The voice said, "A very good joke indeed, an excellent jest. We will have many a rich laugh about it at the house, over our wine." "The Amontillado," I said. "Yes, the Amontillado. But it is not getting late. Will not they be awaiting us at the house? The Lady Fortunato and the rest. Let us be gone." "Yes," I said. "Let us be gone." "For the love of God, Montresor." "Yes," I said, "for the love of God." But to these words I hearkened in vain for a reply. I grew impatient and called aloud, "Fortunato!" No answer. I called again, "Fortunato!" Still no answer. I thrust the torch through the remaining aperture and let it fall within. There came forth in reply only a jingling of the bells. My heart grew sick. On account of the dampness of the catacombs, I hastened to make an end of my labor. I forced the last stone into position. I plastered it up. Against the new masonry, I re-erected the old ramparts of bones. For half of the century, no mortal has disturbed them. And then he says the motto of his family, which is something in Italian I cannot pronounce, but I remember its meaning is important, so I'm going to Google it. Yeah, it's Latin, and it means "no one attacks me with impunity." Yeah, that's right. Yeah! That took a little longer than I was expecting it to, and I had to kind of start over the recording because the first version of the Amontillado I found was a shortened version that cut out all the important stuff. Happy Halloween, be careful out there, and have fun with your spookery. If you enjoyed this video, please consider watching my other videos because they exist, and I'll see you there.